Hi, everyone. Welcome to our One Museum Book Club. We're so very glad you're here tonight. And this particular evening, we will be discussing, let's see, this way, Antisemitism Here and Now by Deborah Lipstadt. So I want to just go over a few ground rules. Many of you have been here before, so this is going to sound familiar, but we also may have some new viewers and participants. So just want to go over how this works. We have a big group tonight, but we want everyone to participate and share their thoughts. So we try to hear from people in three ways. Michelle, I want to introduce my associate, Michelle Gatesy, who will be helping me. So one way you can indicate you have a comment is to raise your physical hand like this with your video on. Another way you can indicate you'd like to participate is raise your virtual hand with the Zoom. I see that Deanna is showing us exactly how to do that. She has a hand raised, and that will pop you to the top of the participant list, and we'll call on you. Or if you prefer, you can type a comment in the chat and we will read it and say, oh, I noticed that Cecilia said the following in the chat. Would anyone like to react to that? So that's how we keep the conversation moving. If anyone has any questions or problems, just you could chat Michelle or I singularly, and we'll try to help you. And with that little introduction, I want to say, I'm so glad you're here. I'm Marcy Larson. I work in marketing at the museum. Michelle is here to help support. And I want to introduce our moderator tonight, Michael Sirota. Michael is a graduate of SUNY Albany with a major in history, and also a graduate of U of I Law School and a member of New York, New Jersey, and Illinois bars. He's had a long career working as an attorney, both in the Federal Trade Commission and at Leo Burnett, practicing marketing law, intellectual property, and entertainment law. And he retired on January 10th, 2017. The 10th is my brother's birthday, by the way. Took a day off and started training to become a docent the next day. So he's been a docent with us for about 4 years and is very excited to be facilitating this conversation. So with that, I'm going to turn it over to Michael to get us started.
Thanks, Marcy. Thanks for that nice introduction. First, I'm going to talk a little bit about Deborah Lipstadt's background and how the book came to be written, and then we'll go into the substance of the book. So Deborah Lipstadt is a historian, and she's a professor at Imari University in Atlanta. Her title is Modern Jewish History and Holocaust Studies Professor. She's most well known, however, as a leading authority on Holocaust denial. In June of 1993, she published a book called Denying the Holocaust, in which she accused the British, and I use the term historian reservedly, the historian David Irving of being a Holocaust denier. And several years later, he sued her and her publisher, Penguin Books, and he sued her in England for libel. Under English law, the burden of proof was on Deborah Lipstadt to prove that the Holocaust actually did happen and that David Irving had lied about it. Her overwhelming victory, it was in front of a judge, not a jury, was memorialized in a 2006 book called History on Trial, My Day in Court with a Holocaust Denier, and in the movie, the 2016 movie called Denial, in which Deborah Lipstadt was played by the English Jewish actress Rachel Weisz. So in August of 2014, Professor Lipstadt wrote an op-ed column in the New York Times about the rise of Muslim anti-Semitism in Europe. She said that her prior view had been that she thought there was a tendency for Jews and Jewish organizations to cry wolf sometimes and to exaggerate fears of a rise in anti-Semitism. But now she said that she was coming to believe that there was a rise in anti-Semitism, and she was worried about it. It's interesting, the column starts off with her definition of a Jewish telegram, which is, start worrying, details to follow. The column got very good reviews, so her literary agent said, so where's your book proposal? And after a while, she put together a book proposal. It was accepted. And at the end of 2015, she started writing a book. And it wasn't just about Muslim anti-Semitism in Europe. It was about anti-Semitism for now.
We got one of your favorites here.
She said she was a little frightened while she was writing it. She was a historian, used to writing about things in the past that had already come and gone. And this was about here and now. She also said that it was an almost impossible book to finish. So my first question is, why was the book so difficult to write for her? And why was it almost impossible for her to finish it? Any thoughts from readers of the book? It's always hard answering the first question. What I tell my students on tours at the Holocaust Museum are, there are no wrong answers or wrong questions. So the question is, why did she find it so hard to finish the book? I mean, she's writing it and events are occurring. There's a murder of a Holocaust victim in Paris.
What's it?
Viktor Orban gets elected, who's an anti-Semitic candidate, gets elected to lead Hungary.
So, Michael, Patricia was raising her hand and would like to make a comment.
Okay, great.
I would say to predict the future is a very hard thing to do. And Deborah's writing about what she thinks the future is becoming. So she doesn't want to be wrong as a great historian. So I think that's why it was tricky and hard to finish. She didn't know what was going to happen.
Yeah, that's a very good comment. In fact, she says that she normally, as a historian, doesn't make predictions, but she was so concerned about the ongoing anti-Semitism that she made a prediction, and she said that she predicted that by the time the book came out, and she put this in at the very end, after she was totally done with the draft, she puts in the introduction a paragraph that says, by the time this book comes out, I think there's going to be other events, significant events, that I wish had been included in the book. She kept asking her publisher for extensions because these things kept happening, and he extended it and extended and extended, and finally said, we've got to put the book out. So I guess the next question is, did her prediction prove to be true?
Michael, before we move to the next question, I saw Laurel had their hand raised. And
Okay.
I also noticed a question in the chat about Muslim anti-Semitism.
Okay. Is there a specific question about Muslim anti-Semitism?
I think that Dina, if you have a specific question, please let us know. But I think we're just wondering what is meant by that.
Oh, apparently there have been attacks mostly by younger Muslims in Europe, and that they said the statistic is that 95% of the anti-Semitic attacks are by younger Muslims. And that there's a fear in Europe that you don't go walking around with a kippah or a yarmulke or a Jewish star that you wear outside your shirt, because there's so much anti-Semitism, you might be a victim of violence or abuse.
Laurel, did you want to?
Sure, I was going to add into the previous question, if I may. I was going to remark that, history is fluid, it's not static. So she was like trying to swim upstream in regards to annotating and explaining events that are currently happening, and they were happening so quickly. So I'm just adding to that the fact that how could she even finish the book or be afraid of finishing it? Of course, because it's never finished. Our struggle as the Jewish people is never finished, will never be finished, and it will continue. And I think she really realized that. And that's one of her reasons for, I'm surprised she even did this book, to be perfectly honest. I've met her. I had the honor to meet her at a speaking engagement in Cincinnati. And I'm just surprised she even agreed to do it based on, her talk that day. But yeah, I'm glad she did. It's just
Why do you say you're surprised she wrote a book on anti-Semitism?
well, not on anti-Semitism, but trying to catalog,
Oh,
and evaluate here and now. Yeah, just because I think it's an impossible task. And I think, I believe well, I don't know. I suspect that she believes that too, because as I said before, history is not static, it's fluid. And being Jewish has always been a fluid situation. I mean, you just look at our history and, you can't predict anything.
right.
One ruler to the
There's-
next makes all the difference in the world. So
There's one comment in the chat that might expand on that from Marcy Bloom, and Marcy, feel free to jump in. And she
Sure.
says that anti-Semitism now might be viewed as more complex. It's commonplace, ongoing, and easily spread due to the proliferation of hate speech on social media.
Right, and we're going to get to that.
There's one other question, and
Oh, I'm sorry.
which is when, and I'm not so great with the exact dates, but when did the Tree of Life shooting happen versus via
That was
this book?
my very next question.
Okay.
The prediction proved to be true, and the answer was yes. On October 27th, 2018, she finishes her last. She adds that sentence about the prediction in the first few days of September. On October 27th, almost 3 months later, a 46-year-old gunman named Robert Gregory Bowers attacked the Tree of Life synagogue in Pittsburgh and killed 11 Jews and wounded 6 other people. It was the largest attack on the Jewish community in the United States history. The book comes out in February 2019, and of course, this incident is not included. So her prediction proved to be true, sadly. So that's when that happened. So we have about 45 minutes left. And as you know from reading the book, it is chock full of issues. I have an initial question, and that is about the format of the book. It's a serious book, but it's written in the form of letters back and forth between Professor Lipstadt, a Jewish student of hers, and a non-Jewish colleague who's a law professor at Imari. Did that format add to your enjoyment or detract from your enjoyment of reading it? Did you think it was all odd that she chose that? Anyone? I can tell you the reason she did it is she started writing the narrative, and she said she was so bored reading a straight narrative that she decided to use that format. Let's.
Okay, Dina, go ahead. I see a hand raised.
Okay.
I think it made it a lot more readable. You were able to connect to both the student and the teacher and the questions that they had. And because they're inner questions that we have. And she took those questions and answered them, even to the spelling of the word, which was, I now spell it the way she does.
What was very frustrating when I was typing up my questions is every time I spelled anti-Semitism as one word, spell correct, Microsoft Word would change it, put it in a hyphen and put a capital S. So we'll have to all write to Microsoft and tell them to change that. So let's get into some substantive questions. And one of the basic questions is, the book is about anti-Semitism. According to Professor Lipstadt, in the West at least, it's the New Testament that is a great source, or at least how the church treated the New Testament and other Christian writings about the death of Jesus. How did it come about that anti-Semitism grew from where it began, really in the 3rd century when Rome officially became a Christian empire, or the 4th century, to 1965, in which the Pope said the Jews are not collectively responsible for Jesus' death anymore? How do you think the anti-Semitism, how do you think the church doctrine caused anti-Semitism?
Go ahead, Michael. I see a hand raised.
Okay.
Well, I mean, I think one of the issues is that it's mostly visual. I mean, if you go up and go to church every Sunday and see the word IMRI over the cross, think of the Jews, the association can very quickly morph into anti-Semitism. At least that's how I have been thinking about it. Okay, I've thought about that. And so that's sort of, I think the best way is visualizing. I think the word Imari should probably be removed from all churches.
Yeah, that's a good point. There's an interesting scene in Matthew chapter 27. Pontius Pilate has Jesus in front of him, and there's obviously a Jewish crowd there, and he's supposed to be judging him. And Matthew says, so when Pontius Pilate saw that he was gaining nothing, but rather that a riot was beginning, he took water and washed his hands before the crowd, saying, I am innocent of this man's blood. See to it yourselves, meaning it's your responsibility. And all the people, meaning the Jews, and all the people answered, his blood be on us and our children, meaning future generations. And I think the church took that, and while the church initially was a small sect of Judaism, once it became the official religion of the Roman Empire, Judaism became a competitive religion, and they rejected Jesus. And Christianity was supposed to have superseded Judaism, but the Jews didn't want to go away. And according to Professor Lipstadt, what she says is Judaism became a symbol of opposition to Jesus, the murder of Jesus, and evil in the world. That's what Professor Lipstadt says on page 18. That when I was a freshman in college, I got a phone call in my dorm room and someone said, Christ killer. I don't know if anyone.
Mike, we have some comments in the chat.
Okay.
So real quickly from Dina, what is IMRI? Maybe someone used an acronym. I didn't catch.
It means Jesus of Nazareth, King of the Jews in Latin. It's like I is for Jesus' name, Nazareth is the N, R is Rex, and I is Israel. Okay, and then Peter Sternberg suggested that James Carroll tackled this in his book, Constantine's Sword. So if anyone's interested, that's a great book. Exploring, that's another.
And Laurel, interesting comment, thank you. I believe that any new religion demonizes the old religion in order to justify their existence. The Quran demonizes both Christianity and Judaism. So
Yeah, I mean, also it should be remembered that since 1965, the Catholic Church has taken the position that the Jews are not collectively responsible for the death of Jesus.
I saw a hand up with Judy Share.
I also saw Cecilia's hand going. So Judy, after you've shared Cecilia, please speak up.
Oh, Judy, you might be on mute.
Thank you. So when I was raising my kids, we lived in a neighborhood that didn't have all that many Jewish people in it. So the schools also didn't have that many Jewish kids. And my daughter was in this was over 10 years ago, my daughter was in a class that didn't have very many Jewish kids, and it was a comparative religions class. And I don't remember what the discussion was about, but at one point, most of the kids in her class turned on her in the middle of a discussion and said, you just have to remember that you're Jewish and the Jews killed Jesus. So this was, 10 or so years ago. And I said to my daughter, did the teacher, who was not Jewish, but very liberal high school, liberal classroom, did the teacher say anything to anybody? And she said, nope, she completely kept silent.
Yeah.
Didn't say a word to me. Yep.
Oh, I'm sorry.
No, go ahead. I was just going to say she felt completely attacked. Nobody stood up for her. And when she came home and told me, I'm like, this is 2000 and whatever it was. Are you kidding me? They were accusing you at 18 years of age or something. So what were you going to say?
I was going to say that Professor Lipstadt spends one page on this, and we've got 35 minutes left, and there's so much interesting stuff in here, and so many issues she raised. I think we should move on.
Well,
one of the reasons she raises this, oh, I'm sorry.
Well, Cecilia had a comment too, so I think
I always want to hear from Cecilia.
Yeah, and Judy, I think that's super interesting. I would say, I don't want to defend the teacher, but my guess is they were probably deer in headlights a little bit. Like,
yeah, she was.
How do you respond to that? Yeah,
right. There's a longer story to it, which I won't go into now, but it was just, it shocked me. I was very surprised for all the things that had happened and I'd experienced. That was really surprising.
Yeah. Okay, Cecilia, to you. Are you muted?
Oh, she's not muted, but we can't hear her.
Cecilia, can you either speak louder or talk closer to your mic? Oh, you might need to use the chat for whatever reason your audio is not working. Okay, Cecilia, can you use your chat? Okay. There is one comment from Sandra in the chat that says, isn't it, and I'd love everyone's reaction, isn't it a bit narrow to focus on the church as the cause of anti-Semitism? I think Michael was possibly referring, it came from the book. That was the start of this conversation.
Right.
I think to expand it and say the Greeks targeted the people of Israel, as did the Egyptians, not to exonerate the church for its teachings or its activism in acts of anti-Semitism.
No, she doesn't. I don't think Professor Lipstadt says it's the cause, but she says it's a significant cause. And the reason I think she even brings it up is because that cause has been around for so long and so much a part of Western history that she says it's almost entered the subconscious of Western civilization. And I think, Michelle, we can play that first clip in which Professor Lipstadt talks about the ever-presence of anti-Semitism below the surface, and she compares it to something interesting.
Can you all see my screen?
Yes.
Yep.
Okay, let me know if you can't hear. Please speak up. I pressed
You know, she
play.
said, no, it's a perfect description.
You have to enable audio.
I did. It's not
You know, and
playing.
it's disgusting, but I hear this.
Louder?
Your herpes, but until very recently, you had herpes. This is serious. I'm not.
She's talking about how anti-Semitism is like herpes.
Please no one tweet this
Yeah,
analogy.
right. If you had herpes, it never went away.
Yeah.
Okay. Well, Michael, you know what she said. Why don't you
Okay,
just talk to the analogy? It's pretty interesting.
Okay, what she says is that anti-Semitism is like herpes, that herpes seems to come out when there's stress in a society, either economic, social, and that now is a time that there is a lot of stress in the world and conflict, and it's one of the reasons that anti-Semitism is showing its head now, that there's an increase. I also wanted to talk about the characteristics that Professor Lipstadt says anti-Semites say Jews have, like what the anti-Semitic, how an anti-Semite would describe Jews, what those characteristics are that have been part of a sort of theme throughout history. And I'll give you an example that it was written in a 1903 document written, a forgery by the Russian Tsarist police called the Protocols of the Elders of Zion, in which they said there was a world conspiracy by Jews to take over the world. And it characterizes the Jews as worshiping money, wanting power, and maliciously trying to control others using their conniving intellects to get their ends. And it was interesting because recently Marjorie Taylor Greene, the representative, had an explanation for why there was fires in California. Does anybody know what her reason was?
Yeah, I see Emma and Eric. I see Eric nodding his head. Do you maybe want to jump in?
It was Jewish space lasers.
That's right. Jewish space lasers controlled by the Rothschilds.
Dina, I see your hand raised.
First of all, I took notes throughout the whole book. But the political right used to say Jews are socialists, communists, and revolutionaries. And the political left said that the Jews were wealth obsessed, capitalists, anti-poor. It didn't matter.
Where, Michael, I think where you were headed is where did that all come from? Like, what drove those characterizations?
Well, she says that anti-Semitism is basically just a kind of conspiracy theory. That whenever evil happened in the world, they said they thought it was a conspiracy of the Jews, like bubonic plague. It seems like George Soros is behind every bad thing that happens these days. I think it would be a good idea to play the Jews Shall Not Replace Us video. I hope we can hear it.
I will attempt. I'm turning my volume quite a bit higher. So I suspect there were other issues at play while I was trying to share. I'm also including sharing my sound. Let me know if you can see.
If you hit play.
I've pressed play and for some
We're
reason it's not
seeing-
playing immediately.
Yeah, we're seeing it, but it's taking a minute to load.
Yeah, it's all buffered.
Well, as we all know, in Charlottesville, the white supremacists marched and screamed out, "The Jews will not replace us, the Jews will not replace us." What does that mean? What does that mean? I initially thought it meant one thing, but after reading the book a second time, I realized that there's a second meaning to it, and it has to do with this whole idea of the Jews having this need, this conspiratorial need to control the world. And they do it by controlling third.
I think we're going to have to move from this
Okay.
with yeah, let me try mine. I have the link as well. Keep going, Michael. Maybe I can get it to work.
Okay, so the question is, what does that mean? The Jews will not replace us. I'm just asking the group in general.
There's a lot of fear of immigrants and refugees at that time. And they were saying the Jews were causing the refugees and immigrants to come to this country, overtake the white people's power.
That's absolutely a perfect answer. Yeah, it's going back to the old conspiracy theory that Jews will use their conniving power to make immigrants come to the United States and replace these white people who were marching in Charlottesville. So that's what they meant by the Jews will not replace us. They will not have their way to get immigration to open up.
There's Ron had a hand up, and then I think there's something more in the chat.
No, I was just going to mention something similar to that, going back to the conspiracy theories that this Jewish cabal is the small Jewish cabal is responsible for everything that happens in the world, all the wars and everything else, and we're going to replace, take over. We control the banks, even though we're all communists, and so on.
So where do we think that comes from? Does Lipstadt get into that? Does she explain it?
It's from the protocols
What do you mean by protocols? Can you expand?
of the Elders of Zion that Michael mentioned from 1903.
Dina, do you have a hand up? No, okay. Shelley, hi.
I think part of it is that they feel that we're a part of a very liberal culture that they don't like. And that they also have these conspiracy theories that somehow we're puppet masters for African Americans and other groups that they don't like. So we're cosmopolitans and degenerates, and anything to do with more liberal policies or liberal social policies or new families, it's all our fault.
That's an excellent point.
In the chat from Marcy Bloom, Jews will not replace us was accompanied by quote unquote blood and soil, the deadly blood emboldened phrase from Nazi Germany. It's all about white supremacist, white genocide conspiracy theory. So that's a bit narrower.
It was interesting.
And then I'm going to continue on here real quick.
Okay.
Also, there's always a debate about whether Jews are white in white supremacist culture. Very interesting comment. And this is just like the America First Caucus that was proposed by Marjorie Taylor Greene. Again, a comment, however, the Jews are white too. They don't look different from white supremacists, do they? So does anyone want to comment on that kind of dichotomy or contrast?
Yeah, are the Jews white?
Thoughts on that?
I see Shelley with a hand up.
What's interesting is how white supremacy has expanded from what Hitler is. A lot of the people who are white supremacists wouldn't be considered Aryans by Hitler, and they'd be on the side of his fury. So just like in Europe, oh, I can tell if somebody is Jewish, they don't look that way. They wouldn't think that. They would still think that we look different.
Yeah, and a really interesting comment from Anita Devine: racial hierarchy, including eugenics types of theories, comes into play. And then Peter, let's face it, it's hard to pin down the 25 most pressing reasons for hating Jews. And I guess it's just one more reason to hate. And Ralph, I see your hand up as well.
Yes. Adolf Hitler could not ever call us a religion. He called us a demonic race in Germany as he was coming to power. And he had to explain why we were a demonic race, because he had to provide physical characteristics to us which didn't exist. But that's the only way to identify us Jews as a race. He said all of us had kinky brown hair. All of us had a reddish complexion, taking away from the idea of being white. And every Jew had large, crooked noses. And by putting up the posters all over Germany with pictures that looked as ugly as they possibly could, this is the definition that he was giving to his 65 million people for the 500,000 Jews that he described as a demonic race, in order to get them, the other 64.5 million, to hate us because of what he was teaching. And that was part of the Nazi idealism that caused all that anti-Semitism that wasn't really there in the early days when my parents were growing up.
Thank you, Ralph. From Jacob Bader, I love the comments. Thank you everyone for your really interesting insights. Anti-Semites would argue that Jews are dangerous because they look like other white people and can blend into society, and therefore do their whatever without people noticing. Sarah said that another write down this book if you're interested comment. Tyler Stovall has a new book on whiteness and suggests that whiteness depends on context. Interesting observation. Thank you for that. And then, okay, there's some conversation about Hitler Jewish, which the participants are handling on their own, so I'm not going to go there. Back to you, Michael, if no one else has a comment.
Okay, we're talking all about right-wing, or what's the basis of right-wing anti-Semitism. We talked a little about Muslim anti-Semitism. Deborah Lipstadt wrote this book because there was an increase in anti-Semitism. And the question is, why? The Anti-Defamation League said that the numbers started to tick up in 2015. So the question is, why was there an increase in anti-Semitic acts, especially in the United States, in 2015?
I see Michael's hand up.
Personally, I think it's happened with the rise of populism, and populism, when it occurs, will very often stoke anti-Semitism. That's my perspective.
What kind of populism?
Well, I think the elections that occurred between Republicans and Democrats, I'm not sure who supports whom here, but my perspective was that the election of 2016 was based more on populism rather than discussing issues. And populism will always Jews are a convenient subject to demonize. And so that's my perspective. So that's one option, I think.
Thank you. That's a really good insight.
Anyone else? Bobby?
I will admit I'm Michael's wife, but I have something to add. And I will also say I haven't read the book, but I'm assuming that part of this also had to do with a lot of anti-Israel sentiment. And that, you know, I mean, I think that, and I don't know if this is what you're getting at, Michael, but that there's a lot of anti-Semitism from the right. There's also anti-Semitism from the left. And I assume a lot of that has to do with a lot of kind of, you know, pro-Palestinian, anti-Israel sentiment. So I assume that that's a contributing factor.
Right. Deborah Lipstadt uses Jeremy Corbyn, the former labor leader, as the quintessential leftist anti-Semite. Why is there anti-Semitism on the left? I'm not asking.
There's a comment in the chat that
Okay.
suggests that since 2018, hate in all forms was given the green light and it became normalized. And then there's another comment that says, it seems to me Jews do better than other groups in terms of education, economic success, and people who don't do as well might resent that. And then really another comment. These are three unrelated. So Michael, I'll leave it to you to take these however you want to take them.
Okay.
Marcia suggested that's what's surprising is that Hitler got many of the ideas of how to treat Jews as different from Aryan Germans using the Jim Crow laws as a basis of the Nuremberg laws. So.
Absolutely, and that's reflected in this best-selling book called Caste. She talks about how in Germany, they literally based the book on 1920s and 30s Jim Crow laws. And in fact, the Jim Crow laws were more severe than the Nuremberg laws, because if you had one drop of African-American blood, you were African-American, whereas if you were only 1/8 Jewish, you were considered an Aryan. The museum is nonpartisan, but Deborah Lipstadt has very strong views about President Trump's role as an enabler. She says, I don't know if he's personally anti-Semitic, and he's done some good things. He moved the capital to Jerusalem. His administration brought about the peace treaties with Muslim countries, but he used Jewish stereotypes about them being good negotiators and being conniving, etc. But he enabled others to have a platform in which they can express their the right to express their anti-Semitism, and it became part of the mainstream. And Michelle, if you could show the two pictures, stills, luckily. These are after the book, but they show the influence. One, they're both items of clothing. One, this was worn, these are the two. The one on the right, does anybody know what 6MWE stands for?
6 million, not enough.
6 million wasn't enough, referring to the number of Jews killed. And this was in a Proud Boys demonstration a few weeks before the January 6th insurrection. And the one on the left is taken during the insurrection. And it says, Camp Auschwitz. And these people wore these proudly in the streets. So it sort of shows what was more acceptable during the Trump years.
Yeah, I'm going to step in here. I think there was a shift. We can attribute it to Trump, but it was a societal shift, and it was larger than just anti-Semitism. I think it created othering for many people, and it pitted one against the other, and we're seeing the result of that. So I think so let's just talk about the shift in society, where we are today, and less about why it happened, if we can.
Okay. But you know what? I think we should talk about the left, because that's half the book and we haven't really talked about it. Bobby brought it up.
Yeah, and there's a couple of things in the comment.
Okay, great.
Comments that there was a comment about AOC and the Benjamins. And one person, this is where I would love to take it, that talked about the media being, I've noticed, Samantha, thank you for this comment. I've noticed that major newspapers are presenting Israel in a negative light, which I feel has contributed to anti-Semitism.
Are presenting what?
Israel in a negative light.
Yeah, Professor Lipstadt says it's okay to criticize Israeli policies, but her concern is that at some point they start using these conspiracy theories that Jews control everything, they control the United States, and that she has a problem with focusing just on Israel as the main evildoer in the world. Does anybody want to talk about that? Or this leads into the boycott, divestment, and sanctions movement, which Dr. Lipstadt has a lot to say about why she's opposed to those.
Yeah, I mean, Karen has a comment in the chat that says, why is there so much, and I think this plays right into your question, Michael, why is there so much anti-Israel sentiment that leads to anti-Semitic sentiment? Is there a book you could recommend that would help clarify this issue? You know, I think, go ahead, Michael.
Well, I think there are many, many books on this subject. There's not one particular one I could point out. I'm sure other people can put them in the chat if they have recommendations. What she seems to say, though, is that what troubles her is that people who are opposed to Israel, as opposed to other countries, think Israel should disappear. That it's the only country that people focus on that they say the solution is you should just go away. I don't know where they want it to go, back to Poland, like the reporter Helen Thomas suggested, or what? Also, the idea that it's so focused on Israel. I mean, the Palestinians claim this was our land and we want it back and you should disappear as a country. Nobody says that about the United States and the Native Americans or the Canadians and the First Nations or the Australians, and I'm sure I'm saying something politically incorrect, Aborigines, whatever the appropriate term is. But they say it, Professor Lipstadt makes a point of, but they say it about Israel.
So is she saying, and I'd love everyone's point of view on this, that when you criticize Israel's politics, it's okay, you're criticizing another country and everyone has a right to say yay or nay to the way they act. But when you go as far as saying Israel does not have a right to exist, you've moved it from criticizing policy into anti-Semitism. Is that
exactly.
a fair? Okay, and what does everyone think of that? Is that a reasonable definition? Any comments? Patricia, I see your hand up.
Yes. Deborah's one of my close friends. And I've gone to many talks and gone to Pittsburgh with her when she spoke out after Tree of Life. And I think that's exactly what she believes. You can criticize Netanyahu, you can criticize the politics, but you can't say Israel has no right to exist. That, she feels, is crossing the line to anti-Semitism. There are countries that are killing people every single day. No one says one word about them except they say Israel is so bad.
It feels like a really a reasonably simple way to characterize a reasonably complex conversation. Do people think that's overly simplistic or have thoughts on that? Michael?
I think part of the issue is that Israel has never learned to advertise itself. You know? I mean, for instance, I mean, when Haiti, when there was the, oh, it wasn't Haiti, the hurricane, I think it was Haiti. The first country that went to help them was Israel, and nobody knew about it. And I think that's one of the failings of Israel, that it doesn't seem to know, or it doesn't seem to want to, or it's still under the umbrella of we should not say it, that they are a great country and they should learn to advertise themselves. And I think that's one of the issues. Like a really good example, I think, is that people don't. I read an article that actually the reason why the Abraham Accords came about wasn't because of Trump or Jared Kushner. It was because Obama happened to have given a huge tax advantage to the solar company in California. I think it was called Solar or whatever. And what caused, and then obviously Saudi Arabia, they got so upset about it, they decided to go to Israel to see how they can expand their economy. And nobody ever talks about that, you know, so.
I think it's an interesting observation. I'd like to pose this question. Is that a double-edged sword? We've been talking about stereotypes and Jewish people are this or that. And if Israel starts talking about their leading in technology or helping other countries, does that just play into the Israel controls the world stereotype? Any thoughts on that? All right, back to you, Michael. We've got about 5 minutes. I don't know if you have a question or two you want to close with.
Professor Lipstadt says that there's a risk that Jews will be so focused on anti-Semitism that they won't be able to separate the oi from the joy. And she says that everyone feels Jewish when there's anti-Semitism, but you shouldn't define yourself by what your enemies call you or how they characterize you. And I was wondering how many, I mean, there's also, I mean, this is being sponsored by the Holocaust Museum. Other people define being Jewish by the Holocaust. And she would say, that's not right either. You should define yourself by what's good about Jewish culture, Jewish life, Jewish food, Jewish religion. And I guess the final question is, what does she say you should do as an individual, say, if you encounter an anti-gay, an anti-racist, I'm sorry, a racist, an anti-gay, anti-Semitic comment? What does she say to do?
Patricia, please.
Holocaust tours, we play a tape by a rabbi at the 1963 Martin Luther King Washington March who says the worst thing in the world is silence.
Yeah, Patricia has a hand up. I think she'd like to answer your questions.
So what Deborah feels most strongly, and what I got out of her book and what I get out of her friendship, is we cannot accept for 1 second any anti-Semitic, any racist remark. You have to cut it off the minute it comes up. She gave a lot of examples in the book. Friends are shopping. Someone says, oh, of course, you like that cheap, you know, you're Jewish, so you know about saving money. She said, she gives an example. I don't know if it's in the book or she said it once at dinner, but she says, the mother used to say, Uncle Morty before Thanksgiving dinner, the mother would say to the children, now you know Uncle Morty, he's gonna say some things that are politically incorrect. Ignore him. Deborah says, that's over. There's no more ignoring it. You stop it in the bud. The minute someone says anything, you call them on it. If you see someone belittling another person, you call them on it. You have to end it immediately. And every one of us has the ability to do that.
I think I see Laurel clapping, and I agree 100%. But then the response is, I was just kidding. I didn't mean it. He's old. We can't change his ways. He doesn't know. How do you respond to all of those?
It's not funny and it's hurtful to me. So try to not ever do that again for the rest of your life.
Don't be a bystander. Thank you, Anita. Any other, Enid, were you going to say something?
No, Ralph did.
I was saying be an upstander.
Be an upstander. Go, Ralph. It feels like the perfect sentiment to kind of wind this down because we are 2 minutes till 8. Does anyone have anything else they'd like to say? Michael, do you have any closing comments or thoughts?
No, I had a list of 23 questions and I got 6 of them. So I think we still had a very, very lively, interesting discussion. So I want to really thank everyone for their participation. I thought it was terrific.
Once again, I am going to echo Michael's sentiments. We thank you for being here. This is my favorite hour of the month when I get to host this and listen to really interesting people share their ideas. So I'm going to just close and say our next book club will be discussing Kendi's book, How to Be an Anti-Racist. I think on 5/11, May 11th, same time. I don't know if you figured this out, but we're usually the second or third Tuesday of the month at 7. So if you're looking for a pattern, that's it. And I wanted to alert you to our next program at the museum, which is a virtual program of the reading of The Righteous and then a conversation after the fact. And then a program not to be missed, Pinka Scooter is going to be a lunch and learn May 13th at noon. Mark your calendars. I don't know if many of you associated with the museum might know Pincus. He was the Holocaust survivor who was featured on the 60-minute profile of the holograms. And he is a warm, thought-provoking man. And I would urge everyone to tune in. It'll be a great event. So that's May 13th at noon. With that, I wish you a lovely evening. And we'll hang out for 2 or 3 minutes if anyone wants to talk to us one-to-one. Goodbye.